Hi there, welcome. This is Cambridge House Live. My name is Jonathan Roth. I'm joined right now by Peter Grandich. He is the editor of the Grandich Letter, and he's also the author of a new book, Confessions of a Wall Street Whiz Kid. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Listen, obviously what's going on in the markets right now, hell, like some people think that we've descended into hell here. What's going on? What do you see happening here?
Well, I've actually called it purgatory on earth, so we're pretty close to hell.
Pretty close to hell.
It has been, I certainly didn't see it. To know I've lost more money on paper in the last 6 months than I ever imagined as a young man I could ever have. It is befuddling. It's hard to understand how the junior resource market could see such widespread damage when the prices of metals are maybe where they were 6 or 9 months ago. I like to give you a lot of explanations, but I think a lot of it would be fluff. Whatever reasons it's happened, people have made it feel like last one out turned the lights out like it was when gold was $250. It's unjustifiable. I believe we've seen the worst. I believe Friday was a key turning point because of what happened in the metal prices. But I also don't think it's going to go back to great lengths of heights anytime soon. We're going to have to go through a building period. I like to describe it as we're going to have to go through an L. We bottomed, but we're going to go sideways for quite a bit.
So what's going on? Because what we see happening in Europe, obviously, is what everybody's concentrating on. But you also see slowdowns in China. I mean, there's a slowdown. It goes from 9.5% or 10% growth down to 8%. But still, there's something happening there. We see a bit of a slowdown happening in India, and obviously the situation in the United States. Put some of those pieces of the puzzle together for me. What's going on? Because long term, some people would say that this is really catastrophic what's happening globally.
Well, we certainly are, and I'll just speak as an American and about America. You know, America has been robbing Peter to pay Paul and is tapped out. What we're seeing in Greece in particular is just an opening act to what's going to eventually come to the shores of the United States. We're broke. People can battle, the Republicans and Democrats can blame each other, whatever, but we're basically broke. And when you're broke, only three things can happen. You renege on your debt, you restructure it, or when you have an advantage just like in America, you print money and you monetize it. Because it's kind of spreading around the world, and we're seeing that in Europe, and like you said, China slowing down, there's a feeling there'll be no need for commodities. And so we've seen, oil drop dramatically. We're seeing agricultural commodities come off. But the bottom line is the world is still growing in numbers of people. So I think it would be a mistake to think the commodities bull market is over. But like I said earlier about the junior resource market, when it does bottom, I don't think it's going to rebound and go back up dramatically. But I still believe there's a great need for commodities in general.
Okay, so I want to get to that in a second, but sticking with the United States, you do a lot of work with David Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States. He's still touring around, the U.S., telling everyone that will listen to him that, look, we're sitting on the precipice here. How close to the precipice are they? And depending on what happens in November in the elections there, whether it's Romney or Obama, does it matter in terms of, are we going over the cliff one way or the other?
Well, David Walker to me is my financial prophet of the 21st century. As you know, as the former controller, he had the best idea of how bad the books were in America. Unfortunately, most people still don't listen to him. Most Americans are still living as if it was 10 or 15 years ago and don't understand the ramifications of our debt. And that's why I believe the problem has to get a lot worse before it can get better. And we are close to it. The only thing the election, I think, will do is a Romney win may forestall the inevitable, where an Obama will bring it on that much faster, but in the end, neither one can fix it, and we're going to have to go through some really bad times, and they are not going to be 3 or 6 month durations. They could be a generation or more.
So when do you think the U.S. dollar loses reserve currency status? Is that
my view is no matter who wins, by this time next year, the problems in Europe will refocus and hit the shores of America. It won't matter who wins the national election. Just a Romney win will probably forestall it by 3 or 6 months.
Really? So that's all, Republican, Democrat, doesn't really matter.
The inevitable is going to be at the end. We just can't keep borrowing more money and still try to pay the bills that we owe. And so many more people are expecting more and more entitlement in America, and we don't have the money to pay for it. Eventually the scales are tipped. I don't know what date or time, but it's no longer a question if, it's only a matter of when.
Now, is this because politicians in D.C. are literally just sleepwalking through this process and don't understand the ramifications? Or is there a willful blindness to what is around the corner?
I probably lean to your latter. I believe that, and I do believe when many Congress get first there, they try, but the system is so corrupt, it's really not a Democrat or Republican. That's why I believe out of the ashes of whatever comes will be a new political system. Whether you call it a Tea Party, whatever it will be, is we'll be born out of that, because I believe people will realize that the system can't work, and we're asking the people who led us there to fix it. Right. It's like asking the wolves to take care of the chickens. It's not going to work.
It's just not going to work. So why don't you tell me what's going on in the junior market here? Mining, we're in the middle of ground zero for the mining industry, the junior industry. What's going on with these stocks? Because they're seemingly, they're in the tank.
Well, I've said for years, this is a business where failure is the norm. With all the good intentions that people have in this room, 8 or 9 will not reach their ultimate goal that they hope to achieve, not because they've done anything dishonest, but that's just the way the game works. But we also have to remember about 80% at the end of the day of new metals and new discoveries and commodities are discovered by smaller companies. So there'll always be a need, but what inevitably happens here, they never really die, they become born again until we get recapitalized, restructured. I think the rest of this year is basically a wash at best. We may stabilize, we won't go down anymore, but there's too many companies with too many shares with too low of a price, and they're going to have to get restructured. Having said that, the old story of babies being thrown out with the bathwater have happened. We got juniors now with viable projects that sell for less than their cash position, or in a particular case, a company I'm involved with has a net asset value multiple times of what its current market cap is. So there is value out there, but I think you don't chase value at this point in time. And when we're here next year, please God, we've gone through that washout and rebuilding, and we're onto a more of a bull market type mentality.
So should you be buying right now, or should you still want to hang tight and wait a little bit longer?
I only wish that the cash that I bought 50% higher, which I thought was the bottom, that I still had. But if you're in an enviable position where you can purchase, I've actually encouraged family members who never even looked at metals and mining, that some of these things have gotten so ridiculous price to do it. So yeah, I'd be a buyer going forward,
okay.
Net.
Now, what about gold? We saw it pop a bit on last week, towards the end of the week. Where's that going? I mean, it almost hit $2,000, and then it settled back down, and now maybe we're on our way back up. What do you see happening there?
I've coined it the mother of all bull markets. Look, I don't sell ammo. I don't sell cabins in West Virginia, dry food. I'm not a gold bug because I want the world to come to an end. But 3 distinct things happened in the last 10 years that the perma bears have never grasped, and why they've been wrong, and why I think the bull market's going to continue higher. A, this market used to be held down by central bank selling. They're the largest holders. They were selling it every year. The last 2 years they've been net buyers, and they look like they're net buyers again this year. So that negative is out of the way. Producers used to cut their nose to spite their face. They would sell large quantities of their future production forward. It's now a 4-letter word if you forward sell. And last, the exchange traded funds. There's a great argument among the gold community whether it's really owning gold or not, but what it did is it allowed institutional investors to own gold or get representation of gold without the encumbrance of buying physical gold or buying mining shares that necessarily weren't a proxy to the gold price. Those 3 changes have created this bull market. And then the 4th, the world is awash of printing paper. More and more currencies are being debased. So the bull market only can go higher, in my opinion. And that's why I remain a very strong gold bull.
Gotcha. Okay. You know what? I want to change gears here a little bit. You recently wrote a book entitled Confessions of a Wall Street Whiz Kid. I gave it a really good read, and there's a fascinating story in there. Now, when you wrote it, you said, I think it might have been in the foreword, you said something to the effect of how you were the least likely person to be labeled a Wall Street Whiz Kid. How come? I mean, you didn't go to college, what happened?
Right, I was a warehouse manager. I never finished high school. I started to dabble in stocks because a guy I met where I worked. I turned a small amount of money into large trading options only to lose it to a broker. And in 1984, without any training, I became a stockbroker. By 1987, I was forecasting a crash that happened. And by 1995, I reached the American dream. I had what many would consider then all the money you needed to live happily ever after. But I was also the president and chairman and CEO of the Me, Myself, and I Society. And I was taking the 10 commandments and making them the 10 suggestions and picking and choosing which ones to listen to.
Sure.
I battled depression. I've gone through a lot of ups and downs. I've made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money. And so typically when you think of people see Wall Street, Wharton School, Harvard guy, success, big boats, down at the yacht club. I'm a blue collar guy working in a white collar environment, so that's why I was probably the least likely guy to fall in the position that I did.
So your father was a gambler. To what extent did his, obviously, penchant for gambling, you're working on Wall Street, there's got to be a connection there.
There was. My father never had Shylocks knocking on the door, but he never had really savings until his last 10 years of life. And I probably inherited that because this is gambling, junior resources. See, Wall Street created this word speculating,
Right.
so they don't have to use
Because
the
they
word
don't have to-
gambling.
yeah, exactly.
But they're both the same thing. And there's a tendency for me to do that. I like the idea of trying to turn a dollar into $5 or $10. But the problem on Wall Street is there are a lot of people gambling with other people's money. And then the big problem is they don't get to actually lose it, because if they do real bad, government bails them out. They don't have to pay for their own mistakes. And that's the real bad thing about Wall Street, that you can gamble with other people's money and not pay a price for it.
Now, there seemed to be this underlying theme in the book about your father, and you talk a little bit about the last conversation you had with him, which I read that and I had to close the book and put it down because it was so profound. Tell me what he told you, the last conversation you
The
had.
last night before he would pass away, he basically told me why I was, unfortunately abused as a child fairly bad. He hinted that he committed adultery, like he was telling me, don't do this with your wife, out of like, oh, you must have done it with yours. Walked out of my house, came back, thought he forgot something, kissed me, which I don't even remember my father ever kissing me, let alone. And then the next morning he passed away. And so it was very profound effect, and it took a while to understand it and all. But one of the things he taught me in the end is, and I kind of tie it into this business, is it's no crime being wrong in investing, it's staying wrong. And thankfully in my father's last days and hours, he didn't commit that ultimate crime. He realized his mistakes, he sought forgiveness, and that's all we can do, no matter what faith or non-faith you're in. If you can appreciate and start to forgive and understand that forgiveness is really not for the person you're forgiving, it's for you. And so that was an ability to me to get past what happened as I was a child. And so my thoughts now of my father, or when I speak about him, or to my daughter and all, is of the good things that my father brought me, not the bad. And if you can get that hatred and jealousy and envy out of your heart, which for the most part I think I have in my last years, it's an easier way to live.
Now, there are a million more questions I could ask you about the book, but the way I want to wrap this is everyone who's here at this show is probably likely here because they want to accumulate wealth. They want to be rich. That's why they're here. You were rich, and yet you downsized your life. What do you know that many of these people don't know?
Well, I downsized it because I was going through the first of two really real battles of depression, point to where I didn't even want to live anymore. So I hope people don't have to get to that point to realize that. But there was a big lie that's been kind of Wall Street and Madison Avenue put together. They've convinced society that more money equals more happiness. If you watch all the advertisement, you come with us, you get all the things you want. That's the big lie. If it was just a matter of accumulating dollars, we wouldn't have Hollywood people committing suicide and drugs and all that type of stuff. The falsity is that money is a god. And in my faith, in the Christian faith, that's what we were warned about, that you can't serve two gods. And I used to say God was my, money was my God. And so what I could say to people is, it's okay, and if you are blessed with more wealth, you truly have more of an obligation to help others. And that's kind of where I've stayed focused in my life now, trying to serve others other than myself. Because like I said earlier, there was no one more than the chairman and CEO, than me, myself, and I Society than me. And I think that's what we got to get away. And unfortunately, money, it's a hard habit to break. Worse than any drug or alcohol you can take, the desire for money.
Well, I think it's a fantastic message. It was a really good book. I really enjoyed reading it and would recommend it to anyone. So anyway, listen, thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to the next show and having you here.
Thank you. God bless.
All right.